Once again, good afternoon. We will now begin with today's orientation and Safe Spaces Act for MC. Let us welcome today's blessings with an opening prayer to be led by Ms. Ruby Magsino. This will be followed by the singing of the national anthem.
Good afternoon. Let us put ourselves in the loving presence of the Lord. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Heavenly Father, thank you for allowing us to come together this afternoon. May you bestow your guidance and blessings today so that we can enjoy and appreciate its significance in our lives. We ask that you strengthen us, restore us, and inspire us with your love. Fill us with your peace so that as we journey onwards, we may pour out your love and grace to others, especially to the students you have entrusted to us. May your wisdom and inspiration be our guide as we seek to work together to ensure the best for them. We lift up our prayers to you, Lord, and trust in your infinite mercy. Amen. Miriam of Nazareth, teach us your ways and lead us to Jesus. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Good afternoon.
Let us now prepare ourselves for the singing of the national anthem. Thank you once again, Ms. Magsino, for starting our session with a beautiful prayer. To welcome us all in today's session, I would like to call on our very own President, Ambassador Laura Del Rosario.
Okay, thank you very much, Iha. Okay, I'm happy to be joining you this afternoon and to be able to present to you. I think this is the first meeting of the Child Rights Advocacy Center, isn't it? Yeah, it's the first one. Um, Somehow meeting the parents and also the administrators together. I think you remember that last year, I already start talking about putting up a Child Rights Advocacy Center, especially after the sexual harassment cases came up. Now, what made us decide that we should go to the level of the child is that it came to our realization that some of the offenses committed um, allegedly by the perpetrators were committed against students who, by definition of the United Nations, are still children. Because in the UN definition of a child, it's any human being who is 18 years old and below. And of course, we had the Women and Gender Identity Center, but it focused somehow on the rights of women and, of course, on how to adjust to society and look for equality before the law and look for safety against violence and look for a secure place against sexual harassment. But for children, it's a little bit more complicated, although they could face potentially all of these offenses that are directed against women. Children are also subjected to bullying, physical or cyberbullying, they're also subjected to violence. I mean, in the environments in which they live. And of course, we just want to make sure that they are covered also in terms of social media so that they will know how to navigate this complex world of social media and everything that's happening in it. And so we thought that we should have somebody who is an expert in the field of both women and children, who also knows how to defend them before the courts of law, who also knows how to handle families who might be having some problems with their children, those who are traumatized. And the perfect person for this, of course, is Attorney Miles Esquivel. She's a social worker, a lawyer, and I like to describe her as a litigator. I like that word because lawyers who are litigators are those who go before the courts and they defend people and they stand up for the rights and protection of those people. So Attorney Miles, or just call her Miles, is here meeting you for the first time to give you what has been the revisions in the Safe Spaces Act. And we also have Dr. Noel Racho to discuss with you what we have done to align our policies to make sure that they are already um, in, in line with the changes introduced in 2019 on the Safe Spaces Act that really provide for safe spaces in the school. And of course, aside from the manuals and the protocol, Dr. Racho and Mazos also discussed the other avenues which you can use to reach out for help. And for children, what they can use, they can go directly to Miles. That's why I think Miles is a very good partner of parents, because then you don't have to consult a lawyer because he's already a lawyer, and you don't have to consult a psychologist because a social worker, she's already, all of these things rolled into one. So it is therefore really my pleasure to welcome you and to let you know that we are here together to raise your children together, believing that it really takes a village to raise a child. But sometimes, of course, some members of the village, of course, are dysfunctional, and therefore the school has to do more in terms of catching whatever needs to be caught. And of course, before I introduce myself, I also want to thank the BEU administrators led by Ms. Louie Tampinco, the high school principal, Ms. Nancy Raman, and of course, the grade school principal, Ms. Chrissy Lisaka, and their team. I think they have their assistant principals and their student affairs assistants with you here. So in case, I think you can always approach them, and I think you know their identities. And if you need to ask any questions or comments, please feel free to fill in the chat box. Thank you very much, and may the Spirit of the Lord guide us in our discussion today. And may we all learn from one another, and may we face the future with more confidence as the light of God guides us through these confusing and complicated times. Thank you very much, and a pleasant good morning to all.
Thank you so much, President Del Rosario. Indeed, it takes a village to raise a child. At this point, allow me to call on Attorney Miles Esquivel to give us a brief introduction on Child's Rights Advocacy Center and also to discuss RA 11313 or the Safe Spaces Act.
Thank you very much, Ms. Patriluz Malongsong, our MC for this afternoon, to Ambassador Laura Del Rosario, the President of Miriam College, to all the BEU faculty and non-faculty members, to all our dear parents who are present in this afternoon session, a pleasant good afternoon and a blessed good afternoon to everyone. So I have two tasks this afternoon. My first task is to give a brief introduction of what the Child Rights Advocacy Center is all about, who are we and what we do. And then the second would be to give you a very brief orientation on the salient provisions of Republic Act 11313 or the Safe Spaces Act. So let me start my session with sharing my screen so that you'll be able to see my first presentation about the UN, the Child Rights Advocacy Center or the CRAC. Actually, if you're going to have the acronym of this, it's CRC. It represents Child the Convention on the Rights of the Child, but technically it's CRAC, so Child Rights Advocacy Center. So who are we and what do we basically do at the Child Rights Advocacy Center? Like what President Lula have said a while ago, we are a very young center. We have just been established. I was appointed Executive Director last August 1, 2021, together with my very able and very warm-hearted Associate Director, Dr. Louis Parungaw. So the Charis Advocacy Center technically was created in line with our obligations, the Philippines obligations to the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. This UN Convention on the Rights of the Child is an international human rights treaty that promotes all the rights of children or the specific rights of children. This was unanimously adopted by the UN General Assembly on November 20, 1989, and this was forced or entered into force as a human rights treaty on September 2, 1990. This is one of the most endorsed and most ratified convention, human rights treaty. In fact, about 196 countries signed this document or this convention. And because of our obligation under UNCRC, the Philippine government ratified it on August 21, 1990, and as a result of the ratification, of course, we enacted, no, or Republic Act number 7610 came into being. So this law is the Special Protection of Children Against Child Abuse, Exploitation, and Discrimination Act. And currently, it is our Philippine legal framework on child rights promotion and protection. And under the Declaration of Policies of this particular law, Section 2, it states that public and private institutions has to carry out a program for the prevention and deterrence of child abuse, exploitation, and discrimination. That's the reason why several laws on child protection was enacted by the Philippine Congress. Among these laws are the Anti-Child Pornography Act, the Anti-Bullying Act, the Worst Form of Child Labor Act, the Juvenile Justice Act, and of course, many more others. And there are pending bills now in Congress that are awaiting for its enactment, also to ensure the protection and promotion of children's rights. Among this is the bill prohibiting early marriage, and of course also the bill that protects children during armed conflict situations. And we are trying to work on the enactment of the bill to ensure protection of all children from online sexual exploitation and abuse, because we all know that our children are very active online, no? Very active po sila sa internet, and there are a lot of predators online, and our laws, no, on child protection ay medyo hindi pa po natututukan itong area na to. So we are working with ECPAT so that there will be a study and the pushing of the law for the prevention of online sexual exploitation of children. And of course, also because of Republic Act 7610, DepEd issued DepEd Order number 40 series of 2012. This is the child protection policy or the policy and guidelines on protecting children in school from abuse, violence, exploitation, discrimination, bullying, and other forms of abuse. All of these initiatives is in line with the Philippine legal framework on child protection and promotion, and that is RA number 7610. Very comprehensive kasi po and general po yung mga provisions on 7610 that we really have to come up with specific laws that would implement the provisions of RA 76 also in very clearly. And because of this RA 7610 and the DepEd Child Protection Policy, nabuo po yung Child Rights Advocacy Center or the CRAC. Okay. So it is pronounced as CRAC, not crack, no? Kasi crack has a parang negative connotation. But of course, if you're going to look at the positive aspect of the word crack, no, it's like opening the mind of people so that they will become aware. But para hindi na lang po maguluhan dun sa negative and positive, meaning we decided to have it pronounced as CRAC, or the Child Rights Advocacy Center. So what are the purposes of the center? First is the center will act as the specialized center for advocacy on promotion and protection of child rights. So our focus technically are children, and under UNCRC and our Philippine legal framework on child protection, children are those individuals below the age of 18, or those who may be above 18 but are unable to take care of themselves or protect themselves because of some disabilities. No? So yung focus po ng aming advocacy are these individuals who fall under the definition of children under the UNCRC and our Philippine legal framework on child protection. The second purpose of the center, of course, is to provide concrete, strategic, and child-responsive policies, programs, processes, and practices. So the center will be committed to ensure that hindi lang po policies and programs at processes ang magiging child-friendly, gender-friendly, inclusive, no? But we will be able to practice all of these programs and projects and policies that will be crafted by our institution, Miriam College. And then, of course, another purpose of the center is to ensure that we will be providing support to the goal of the school to create, promote, and sustain safe spaces within our campuses, particularly for our students, for our young students. And then fourth purpose of the center is we plan to collaborate with academic units and relevant offices when necessary, or as may be necessary, so that we will be able to come up with policies. We will be able to implement regulatory and statutory requirements. If Congress issue another new law on child protection and promotion, Miriam College will be the lead in implementing and complying with this particular law or policy to be issued by Philippine Congress or different government agencies tasked to promote and protect children's rights. Like, for example, the CWC, or the Council on the Welfare of Children. And then, of course, the center will provide education and training activities for all of its partner stakeholders, and including po yung mga internal stakeholders of MC. And we plan to conduct action research. And the result of this action research could be feed to our Congress for the possible enactment of laws protecting women and children, and also to the different government agencies who are supposed to come up with policies on child rights promotion and protection. And lastly, the center will be engaging with other schools, both private and public, towards the promotion and protection of child's rights. So the center has 4 areas of involvement. So in order for us to do all of the things that I just mentioned, the first area of involvement of the CRAC is on policy development. So CRAC envisions to be the lead in the development of laws, policies, and programs towards child-responsive practices, and also ensure that MC will be compliant to all the statutory regulations on child promotion and protection. The second area of involvement of the CRAC is on advocacy. And CRAC envisions to initiate discourse with MC stakeholders, both internal and external, particularly among the parents, so that we will be able to raise awareness and consciousness on the different child rights issues and concerns. And we will be able to gather from you what are the best courses of action to address such issues and concerns. The third area of involvement of CRAC is on education. And in this particular area, we will be working closely with academic units to ensure that child's rights promotion and protection are integrated in the curriculum. And other than that, of course, it's very important that this child's rights principles and concepts will be practiced within the institution by all. And the last area of involvement of CRAC would be on training. And in this particular involvement, CRAC will be conducting several learning sessions to its partner stakeholders, both outside and inside, so that we will be able to build the capacities of faculty members, employees, administrators, our dear parents, and other stakeholders who could be partners with MC in child promotion and protection, so that we will be able to have a child responsive education, leadership, service, parenting, and engagement. So in this particular area of involvement, CRAC will do its best to integrate child's right promotion and protection in the key result areas of Miriam College. And we also envision to be the lead institution in terms of providing training and other capacity building activities on child rights promotion and protection to our partner stakeholders and community. So kumbaga, makikilala po ang Miriam College as the lead institution when it comes to child protection and promotion. So these are the areas of involvement of CRAC in line with the creation or the purpose of the creation of the center. And if we will be able to implement all of this, we envision that the center will be a center of excellence, and that as a center of excellence, it will be advocating the promotion and protection of children's rights through policy development, education, partnership, and linkages. And since we will be able to promote and protect children's rights through all of these areas, the center also envisions that it will develop future leaders who are empowered to make a stand in upholding a just and humane society. So the team CRAC is of course composed of the following. Yours truly as executive director, and I am assisted by the most able and the most warm-hearted associate director, Dr. Louis T. Parungao. We will be also having a technical assistant, and I think she will be on board by early November. So these are the teams who will be working with you and discussing with you, no, yung mga concerns po, issues, raising awareness on child protection and child rights promotion. So that's all po for the brief introduction on the CRAC, or the Child Rights Advocacy Center. So for my next responsibility or task this afternoon, I'll be sharing naman po yung salient provisions. So I'll be discussing some of the salient provisions of Republic Act 11313, or the Safe Spaces Act. So technically, this law is very new, okay, because it was just enacted in 2019, and it is popularly known as the Bawal ang Bastos Law. But I enjoyed, para po sa akin kasi, I would like to use yung kanyang totoong pangalan, yung Safe Spaces Act. So this is our new law on how to respond to gender-based sexual harassment. So the focus of my orientation would be on these two objectives. The first would be to inform you the different forms of gender-based sexual harassment under Republic Act 11313, or the Safe Spaces Act, and also to discuss with you the responsibilities of the key players in the implementation of Republic Act 11313, particularly when it comes to educational and training institution. So ang parati po kasing tanong sa amin whenever I lecture on gender-based sexual harassment or Republic Act 11313 since its enactment in 2019. So we started advocating for this and giving lectures on RA 11313 early of 2020. The most common question thrown sa amin or sa akin is that why do we need to have that particular law when in fact we already have Republic Act 7877 or the Anti-Sexual Harassment Law of 1995. So yun yung parati pong tanong sa amin. And I kept on telling them that we need to have an amendment to that old law because that old law only covers harassment that are taking place in the workplace and in educational and training institutions. It does not cover harassment perpetrated in streets and public places and even online. So very limited po yung coverage, no, nung pong lumang batas natin or yung Republic Act 7877 plus. I tell them that it's very difficult also to prosecute 7877 if the perpetrator is just a peer because one of the element of 7877 for you to prosecute criminally harassment is that there should be moral authority, influence, or ascendancy over the offended party. So because of these limitations and because of the harsh realities that 88% of our women aged 18 to 24, even children, experience sexual harassment in streets based on the SWS, no? And 58% of these incidents takes place on street and small alleys in public vehicles and other public places. There is really a need to amend our old law and to expand its coverage. Because like what I have said, 7877 does not cover sexual harassment in public places and online. And based on studies, napakadami pong harassment taking place in public places and online. Most of our people now are very much engaged, and most of our children now are very much engaged in the internet, no, in the web. So doon po nangyayari yung mga different forms of gender-based sexual harassment, and these are not covered by our existing RA 7877 or our old law on sexual harassment. So because of that, of course, in 2019, Congress enacted Republic Act number 11313, or the act defining gender-based sexual harassment in streets, public spaces, online, workplaces, as well as in educational and training institutions. So mas malawak na po yung coverage na. And there are a lot of new provisions, no, inserted in Republic Act number 11313. And one of the good things also in this law is that it provides protective measures for victim survivors of gender-based sexual harassment, and also it provides more stiffer penalties. The penalties now under this law depends on the gravity of the offense you committed. At the same time, this law also provides for a longer prescriptive period, again, based on the gravity of the offense that you perpetrated. Because before, the prescriptive period is 3 years for all acts of gender-based sexual harassment. Now, if you committed online sexual harassment, it is imprescriptible. When we talk about prescription, it means that we're referring to the period wherein you will file the complaint from the time it happened. So meron kang a certain period of time para i-file yon in regular court. So I would like to emphasize pala po that Republic Act number 11313 is a penal law. So the penalty for this would be imprisonment and fine to be given by the courts who tried your cases. Now, the Safe Spaces Act, in its declaration of policies, clearly state that it values the dignity of every human person, and therefore it guarantees full respect of human rights. And also it recognizes the rights of both men and women to have equality, security, and safety, not only in private but also in the streets, public spaces, online workplace, and in educational and training institutions. So when we talk about men and women here in this law, we are talking about all men and women. So we are referring to all sectors, and that includes our children, our youths, no, our trans women and trans men. So ganun po kalawak yung definition ng men and women in the Safe Spaces Act. That's why it is called gender-based sexual harassment. So it doesn't look at your sex or gender preference or identity and expression. It applies to everybody, so long as you're a victim survivor or you're a perpetrator of the harassment. So this law penalizes 4 types of sexual harassment. The first type is that are committed in public spaces or in the streets. The second is those committed online. The third is those committed in the workplace. And the last is those committed in educational and training institutions. So kita niyo po, mas malawak na. Dati kasi workplace tsaka educational training institutions lang po yung covered ng RA 7877. So because of the work of the advocates, no, ng gender equality and children and women empowerment, nagkaroon po ng additional 2 types na pinipinalize ng batas natin na type of sexual harassment. For purposes of my lecture this afternoon, I'll just be covering 3 types of harassment penalized under the law. The first would be the harassment perpetrated in street and public places or spaces. The second would be online sexual harassment. And the third would be on the harassment that are taking place in educational and training institutions. So this would be the three types of harassment I'll be covering in this afternoon's lecture, because I only have 45 minutes to finish the lecture. So the workplace, I will not be discussing it or talking about it anymore. So the first, let's talk about the first type of sexual harassment penalized under the law. This is the gender-based streets and public spaces sexual harassment. For us to better appreciate the acts of gender-based sexual harassment in public places, let us first define ano ba yung public place. Kasi very important that we know what is a public place. And under the law, public spaces or public place includes, among others, number one, the streets and alleys, the public parks, the school. So therefore, our school is a public space. It is a public place, no? So kapag nangyari po yung harassment in the school, that would qualify also as sexual harassment in public places, because it is clearly defined in the law that a school is a public space. It also includes buildings, no? So lahat ng buildings po inside MC, the malls, the bars, restaurants, transportation terminals, public markets. All of these are public spaces. Also, the law stated that lahat po ng spaces that are used as evacuation centers, government offices, also public utility vehicles, they are part of public space. Now, most of the participants to my lectures would ask me, Ma'am, how about Grab? Kasi that's a private vehicle. Will it be considered as a public space? Under the law, the answer is yes, because as defined in RA 11313, private vehicles covered by application-based transport network services are also part of public spaces. So ang kilala kasi natin Grab, pero based on my friend from LTFRB, marami daw po tayong application-based transport network services. Ang common lang pong kilala natin is si Grab. So lahat po ng mga nag-apply ng application-based transport network services sa LTFRB, covered po yan ng definition ng public spaces. And of course, all other recreational spaces such as but not limited to cinema halls, theaters, and spa. So catch-all provision yung last bullet natin. Kasi lahat ng recreational spaces, they can be considered as public spaces. So importante po na maliwanag sa atin yung definition ng public space para alam natin na kapag ginawa po yung mga i-discuss ko later, yan po ay mag-fall under this particular type of gender-based sexual harassment. Okay. So ano po ba yung crime of gender-based sexual harassment in public places? So how is it committed? So this crime of GBSH in public places is committed if there is any unwanted and uninvited sexual actions or remarks against a person. So as you can see from the definition, I highlighted unwanted and uninvited. So it means that it depends on the recipient of your action or remarks, diba? So if your action or remark which is unwanted and uninvited has a sexual underpinning, okay? So ibig sabihin po, that would fall under the crime of GBSH. Now, this crime of GBSH must be committed in public spaces para mag-fall siya under this first category of GBSH in public places. So remember, there is an unwanted, uninvited sexual actions or remarks. It is directed against another person. It is committed in public places. And then ano yung epekto po nitong unwanted and uninvited sexual action or remarks mo? It threatens one's sense of personal space and physical safety. So, pwede mo bang sabihin na, Ma'am, I was just joking? No, you cannot say you're just joking because under the law, it states there, regardless of the motive for committing such action or remarks. So, you can no longer say, I was just joking, it was just in passing, it was not meant for her, etc. Okay? Very clear po yung definition ng batas natin on gender-based sexual harassment in streets and public places. So, tatandaan natin yan. Now, GBSH po in public places is categorized into 3. Okay? So meron siyang level. So bakit po merong level? The level pertains to the gravity of the offenses, because the penalties and the prescriptive period depends on the gravity of the offenses committed when it comes to the crimes of GVSH in public places. So the first classification or category, okay, ito yung mga specific acts po ng GVSH and their corresponding penalties based on the gravity of the acts committed. The first is yung pong tinatawag nating classification A or category A ng gender-based SH in streets and public spaces or public places. So this one, I consider it as light offense. Kaya po yung penalty niya is of course lighter compared to classification B and classification C. So what are the acts that fall under classification A, which we categorized as light offense, no? Of GVSH in public spaces. So andito po yung cursing, andyan po yung wolf whistling o yung pagsipol. Of course, we have catcalling. Ito yung mga any unwanted remarks directed against the person, and these remarks include all misogynistic, transphobic, homophobic, and sexist remarks, no? Nagpo-fall po yan under catcalling. So, in the definition of the law, we say misogynistic if your statement, in whatever form or however you deliver it, shows hatred to a woman or an inherent belief that men are better than women. Yan po yung mga misogynistic remark under the law. And then when we say naman po transphobic, these are statements or remarks in whatever form or however delivered nyo po that clearly indicates fear, aversion, or hatred against persons whose identity and expression does not conform to their assigned sex at birth. Yun po yung mga transphobic remarks or slurs. Part din po ng catcalling yon. And also we have yung ating po tinatawag na homophobic remarks. Ito naman po yung mga statements or remarks nyo that shows or indicative of fear, hatred, and aversion against people who identify themselves as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, no? Or kaya naman po, they find themselves having same-sex attraction. And then of course, yung sexist remarks po natin, ito po yung mga prejudicial remarks natin, stereotyping or discriminatory remarks against sex, no? But more particularly, ang common victim ng sexist remarks natin are women. But men can also be victims of sexist remarks. So all of these fall under catcalling. And then of course, andyan po yung leering and intrusive gazing, unwanted invitations, no? Persistent unwanted comments on one's appearance, yung pong mga relentless request for personal details, no? Tulad po ng pangalan, contact and social media details, or even destinations, no? Kasama din po yung mga paggamit ng mga words, gestures, or actions that ridicule on the basis of sex, or their gender, sexual orientation, identity, and expression. Or for example, also, you keep on telling sexual jokes, no? So that would qualify also as classification or light offense ng GVSH in public spaces. You use sexual names, comments, and demands, or any statement po that will make an invasion on a person's personal space or will threaten the person's sense of personal safety. All of these fall under classification A. And what are the penalties for this, no? Again, since criminal or penal law po ang RA 11313, these are the penalties if you committed classification A of GVSH in public spaces. For the first offense, if you are convicted, you'll be asked by the court to pay a fine of 1,000 pesos. And then you have to render community service for 12 hours. And this community service includes attendance to gender sensitivity training that will be conducted by PNP, the LGU, and the Philippine Commission on Women, or PCW. Now, if you committed again the same type or the same type of harassment that falls under classification A, and you are again convicted for the second offense, your penalty now will be imprisonment of 6 to 10 days, arrest to minor, or the judge could ask you to pay a fine of 3,000 pesos. Now, kung matigas ang ulo mo, di ba, nag-commit ka ulit at nag-fall siya under classification A, so that would be your third offense na. The judge will give you a penalty of imprisonment of 11 to 30 days, arrest to minor, and a fine of 10,000 pesos. Meaning, you will be in prison from 11 to 30 days, and you will be asked by the judge to pay a fine of amounting to 10,000 pesos. So, The imprisonment is from 11 to 30 days. It's basically the judge who will determine whether minimum bang ibibigay sa'yo 11, medium, 15, or 30 days na maximum. So, yung pong husgado ang nagsasabi or magbibigay ng penalty na minimum or maximum for the imprisonment. But you have to, yung fine mo would still be 10,000 pesos. So that's for classification A. Now for classification B ng gender-based sexual harassment, ang nagpo-fall po dito are the following. Number one, if you make offensive body gestures at someone, no? Yung mga common na ginagawa ating body gestures, like yung pag nakakita ka ng babaeng sexy, nag-gesture ka ng Coca-Cola body, yung ginagano mo sa kamay mo. So that could qualify under classification B. Exposure of private parts for sexual gratification with the effect of demeaning, harassing, threatening, or intimidating the offended party. Or kaya naman po, you flash the private parts. There is public masturbation, groping, and other similar lewd sexual actions. All of these fall under classification B. So, ang category ko dito is less grave offense of GBSH in public spaces. Classification is light. Kaya makita nyo po mababa yung penalty pa niya. But for this one, for classification B, since this is already less grave offense, no, ng sexual harassment in public spaces, the penalty is higher than that provided in classification A. In fact, for your first offense under classification B, no, you will be asked by the judge to pay a fine of 10,000 pesos and to render community service of 12 hours, inclusive again of your attendance to GST or gender sensitivity training. Mananawa talaga yung alleged perpetrator o yung convicted sa GST. Again, it will be conducted by PNP, LGU, and the Philippine Commission on Women. So as you can see, no, mas tumaas yung fine. Kanina, sa classification A, ang fine niya for first offense is only 1,000 pesos. This time, it's 10,000 pesos. And then for the second offense, ng classification B, you will be imprisoned for 11 to 30 days or you can be asked by the judge to pay a fine of 15,000 pesos. So kung wala kang 15,000 pesos, papakulong ka na lang ni judge from 11 to 30 days. As you can see, di ba, yung second offense, yung penalty for the second offense in classification B is already the penalty for third offense in classification A. So, mas mataas because less grave na po ang type ng offense na to. Okay? And then for the third offense, for classification B, okay, ang penalty mo po would be imprisonment of 1 month and 1 day to 6 months and a fine of 20,000 pesos. So in classification A, the imprisonment is 11 to 30 days, diba? Tapos may fine ka. But for classification B, your imprisonment would range from 1 month and 1 day to 6 months. So as you can see, tumaas po yung penalty. Unlike in RA 7877 na lahat ng klase ng harassment that you committed, ito lang ang penalty mo, 6 months imprisonment. Okay? But here in RA 11313, mas stiffer po ang penalties niya. Okay? Now, the third category for classifications, third category po for the acts of harassment in street and public spaces is yung tinatawag kong classification C or the grave offense of gender-based sexual harassment that could be committed in public spaces. So dito, nagpo-fall po yung stalking and any acts mentioned in A and B when accompanied by touching, pinching, or brushing against the body of the offended person. Or kaya naman po, there is the touching, pinching, or brushing against the genitalia, the face, the arms, the anus, the groin, the breast, inner thighs, face, buttocks, or any parts of the victim's body, even when not accompanied by acts mentioned in A and B. In one of the case I handled, it happened in a training in a training facility of the Armed Forces of the Philippines. Magkaklase po sila. What the classmate did, what the classmate officer did was he inserted his knee in between the thighs of the classmate and the female. So, parang pinart niya po, ginamit niya pong pang part ng thighs, so ng tuhod ng classmate niya yung kanyang knee. Kasi they were, parang yung classroom nila is cheddar type. Usually, di ba pag cheddar type, pag dumadaan po tayo, patalikod. In this particular case that I handled, yung pong classmate pumasok, dumaan po doon sa harapan ng classmate niya ng paharap. Tapos while passing, yung tuhod kasi po ng classmate niya babae naka-ipit naka-close. So what he did was ginamit niya po yung tuhod niya to part the legs of the female classmate. So, nag-touch po talaga siya dun sa inner thigh nung female classmate niya. So, we filed a case against the alleged perpetrator. So, that is one of the classic example. So, kapag yun ang ginawa mo, that would fall under grave offense or classification C of sexual harassment in streets and public spaces. Okay? So, the penalty here is more higher compared to A and B. And in fact, if you committed this type of harassment in public spaces, for the first offense, you will be imprisoned from 11 to 30 days, or you will be asked by the judge to pay a fine of 30,000 pesos. Plus, of course, kinakailangan mag-attend ka ulit sa gender sensitivity training to be conducted by PNP, LGU, and PCW. So, mas mataas na po yung penalty niya. For the second offense, na falling under the acts in classification C or the grave offense of harassment in public spaces, you will be imprisoned from 1 month and 1 day to 6 months, or you will be asked to pay a fine of 50,000 pesos. And then for the third offense, pwede pong sabihin ni judge sa inyo na makukulong ka maximum period of 6 months or mag-fine ka ng 100,000 pesos. Technically, it's still si judge pa rin po mag-decide whether if a-fine ka niya o ipakukulong ka niya. Okay? There are judges na pag nakitang habitual delinquent ka or kaya naman recidivist ka, no? Sabihin pa ulit-ulit na yung pag-commit mo ng crimes, the judge will not give you a fine anymore. Papakulong ka talaga niya. Sasabihin ng judge para magtanda ka. Okay? May mga instances pong ganon. Kasi if you're a recidivist, no? Paulit-ulit na lang po yung pag-commit mo ng crime, I think a higher penalty should be given to that particular accused, okay, or offender. So yan po yung first type ng harassment under RA 11313. This is the crime of GBSH that are committed in streets and public places. Now, the second type of sexual harassment penalized under the law is what we call gender-based online sexual harassment or GBOSH. So the acronym for this is GBOSH, GBOSH. Yan. So this happens naman po online, no? So ano po yung mga crimes na magpo-fall or acts na magpo-fall under gender-based sexual harassment, or how is it committed? So technically, in this particular crime or act of GBSH, we use the information, or we use information and communications technology. And we send physical, psychological, emotional threats to a person, okay, to any of the recipient mo. At ang effect po is it terrorizes, it intimidates victims, therefore threatening their sense of personal space and physical safety. So tatandaan lang po natin sa GBOSH is that it is committed online. So you used information and communications technology. So ano yung mga sinend mo? All threats that could result to the intimidation or the threatening of the sense of personal space and physical safety of a particular individual. So they could be physical threats, psychological threats, or emotional threats. What are the acts covered under GBOSH or the gender-based online sexual harassment? So like what I have said a while ago, all physical, psychological, and emotional threats covered po yan. All unwanted sexual, misogynistic, transphobic, homophobic, and sexist remarks and comments, whether that are done online. So this could be done publicly, like for example in Facebook, you posted something there in your wall, like the case of I forgot the name of this teenage singer, pero Darren is one of the victim. Si Darren Espanto po yung nag-file. Actually, kasabay ko pa nga siya nung naghihiring kami sa prosecutor's office ng Quezon City. I was handling naman yung case na kinikwento ko sa inyo kanina. Darren Espanto, I forgot the name. Yung kumanta po ng sa liwanag ng buwan. Yan, yun yung kanyang kinasuhan. Because I think in Instagram, sinabihan niya si Darren na bakla. Something like that. No? So, that's why nag-fall siya under dito po sa GBOSH, no? Plus, of course, cyberbullying. Ayan. So, pwedeng done publicly. Pwedeng nag-post ka sa Instagram mo, sa Twitter mo, o sa Facebook wall mo. So, publicly. Or pwede rin po, yung mga unwanted, misogynistic, transphobic, homophobic, and sexist remarks mo, ay ginawa mo through direct and private messages. For example, you use the FB, yung FB Messenger. Or kaya naman po, while having a session online, nag-send ka dun sa chat box pero direct message sa chat box, or even yung nababasa ng iba. So that those things are covered also by this particular act, yung GBOSH natin. And then of course, kasama din po dito yung invasion of privacy through cyberstalking and incessant messaging, no? So panay ang text sa'yo, panay ang PM sa'yo, panay ang send ng mga kung ano-anong messages sa'yo, whether publicly or through private messages or direct messaging. And then it already results to the invasion of your privacy. It already posts threats, no, to your physical safety. Psychologically, you're already terrorized and intimidated. That would fall under this GBOSH. And then also, acts like uploading and sharing of any of the victim's photos, videos, or any information online without the consent of the person, no? You impersonate identities of victims online, or you post lies about them to harm their reputation. That would fall under GBOSH. And also, when you file false abuse reports to online platforms to silence the victims, this also fall under GBOSH. So lahat po ito covered po ng gender-based online sexual harassment. So where do we file GBOSH? Yung gender-based sexual harassment po, of course, you need a lawyer to, gender-based sexual harassment in public places, you file the complaint sa prosecutor's office. Of course, you go to the police station or you go to a lawyer to help you prepare the sinumpaang salaysay, and then it will be filed to the prosecutor's office para po sa preliminary investigation. If there are probable cause, it will be filed in court. So yun po yung dun sa GBSH in public places. Now in GBOSH, it's very important that you file it sa PNP Anti-Cybercrime Group, because under the law, they are the ones primarily responsible to receive complaints. In fact, they are the ones directed by law to develop online mechanism for real-time reporting and apprehension. And I had one case yung na sa messenger po sinend yung mga messages, tapos inansend nung perpetrator. Pero before siya na-unsend, na-screenshot na po nung aking kliyente. So we went to the PNP Anti-Cybercrime Group, and they were able to help us retrieve the messages. Okay, and then of course you can go to NBI Anti-Cybercrime Division. Okay, you can initially you can proceed to the BEU CD, yung Violence Against Women and Children Division, and then if BEU CD finds that what was committed is GBOSH, they will officially endorse you to the NBI Anti-Cybercrime Division. Ang maganda kasi, pag nagpunta muna kayo sa BEU CD, they will be the one to follow up dun sa Anti-Cybercrime Division ng NBI. So meron tayong NBI BEU CD, no? So very important na alam natin saan mag-file ng GBOSH, kasi po they are the ones trained and have the capability or capacity to really look into yung mga online messages and online po na mga crimes committed. Okay. Now, kapag ka po yung mga acts of GBSH in public spaces and online ay na-commit mo, tapos present po yung mga susunod na i-discuss ko, okay, yung mga circumstances na i-discuss ko, automatic po yung penalty next higher in degree will be applied sa inyo. So for example, the harassment took place in a common carrier or PUB, and then the perpetrator is the driver of the vehicle and the offended party is the passenger. Automatic, that is qualified. That is qualified GBSH in public spaces. And therefore, if the person is convicted, the penalty second or next higher in degree will be applied by the court. Okay naman po, the offended party to the harassment is a minor, a senior citizen, a person with disability, or a breastfeeding mother nursing her child. Automatic po yung penalty next higher in degree. Yun ang i-apply po ng court. Kasi qualified po yung act of GBSH in public spaces that you committed or online. Or kaya naman po yung offended party is diagnosed with mental problem tending to impair consent. So that would make the act qualified, so therefore the penalty will be the next higher in degree. Or your perpetrator is a member of the PNP, the AFP, and then the act was perpetrated while the perpetrator is uniform. Bakit po? Kasi syempre, di ba, PNP and AFP is supposed to protect the people, not to abuse the people. So therefore, pag sila yung perpetrator, automatic po qualified. Or the last po, if the act takes place in the premises of a government agency that offers frontline services to the public and the perpetrator is a government employee. Bakit po? Of course, public office is a public trust, di ba? Dapat sila yung nagpa-practice ng utmost na professionalism at saka po intelligence and skill. Ayan. So, pag sila po yung nag-commit niyan, automatic the act of GVSH in public spaces and online is qualified. Anong effect? The penalty next higher in degree will be applied by the court once they are convicted. So the third type po ng harassment penalized under the law is yung tinatawag nating GVSH in educational and training institution. Okay, so ano naman po itong GVSH in educational training institution? Some of its elements are copied from the old law, but there are a lot of new provisions in RA 11313 when it comes to GVSH in educational and training institution. So GVSH in educational training institution is committed when the offender is a teacher, an instructor, a professor, a coach, or a trainer, and the victim is either of the two. Number one, the victim is under the care, custody, or supervision of the offender. And number two, the victim is a person whose education, training, apprenticeship, or tutorship is entrusted to the offender. So yan po yung victim natin. At paano po yung modes ng pag-commit ng GVSH in educational and training? One, for giving of a passing grade, granting of honors and scholarships. And number two, it is made as a condition for the payment of stipend, allowance, or other benefits or privileges. So tatandaan natin yon. Sino ang offender, sino ang victim, ano yung acts, paano kinumit nung offender dun sa victim sa educational and training institution. So tatandaan natin, ang first act is merong pong requirement, merong demand, merong request for any sexual favor. At ginawa ito as a condition for giving of passing grade, granting of honors and scholarship, or payment of stipend, allowance, and other benefits and privileges. The second mode is kapag ka po yung act niya, okay, already results to an intimidating, hostile, or offensive environment to the student or to the teacher. Kasi dito po sa bagong law, nawala na po yung hierarchical relationship as an element of the crime. I'll show that to you later on, okay? So this is how you commit gender-based sexual harassment in education and training institution. So always remember, the offender would be a teacher, instructor, professor, coach, or trainer. The victim is a student who is under the care, custody, and supervision of the offender, or whose education, training, apprenticeship, or tutorship is entrusted to the offender. And then the modes of committing, may demand, request, or requirement for any sexual favor, at yung act of harassment niya already results in intimidating, hostile, or offensive environment. So remember po na since the school is considered a public place, under the definition of the law, yung pong mga acts of gender-based sexual harassment, okay, committed against the student, the trainee, apprentice, and tutor will also be sanctioned in accordance to the penalties mentioned under the crime of GVSH in streets and public places. So for criminal prosecution, we will check whether or not it falls under classification A, classification B, and classification C. So i-identify namin sa sinumpaang salaysayon para po si fiscal, pag nag-file siya ng information sa court, at si judge din naman po, pagka if ever na makonvict, alam po niya yung penalty ipoprovide. Tapos, meron kasi pong may system po ito para malaman kung first offender ka, second or third offender. Kasi meron pong i-maintain na master list ang PNP. Na ito po ay pwede pong makita rin ng different players po doon sa ating justice system or sa judicial system natin. So, the judge would know if you're a first offender ka pa or second offender. So, si fiscal po, pa nag-file ng information, nakalagay agad sa note niya, sa information na second offender siya, second time offender. Okay, or second time na niya for classification A or classification B or classification C. Okay? Para po sa pagbibigay ng penalties. Now, anong bago dito po sa RA 11313 when it comes to GVSH in education training institutions? Well, very clear na po dito yung liability ng school heads and heads of training institutions. At very clear po sabi ng law, In addition to liabilities for committing acts of GVSH, principals, school heads, teachers, instructors, or any person who has authority, influence, or moral ascendancy over the other on educational training institution may be held responsible for, and upon conviction, be given the following penalties. So people, upon conviction, so meaning meron pang additional ka na penalty at makukonvict ka. So there are actually two acts that you could commit as a school head and heads of training institutions. The first is non-implementation of your duties, which I will be showing later, yung mga duties ng mga eskwelahan. And then the second is your failure to act on reported acts of GVSH committed in educational institution. So the penalties naman po is technically fine lang, no? But of course, record pa rin siya kasi upon conviction eh. So for penalties for non-implementation of duties, the school head and heads of training institutions would be penalized with a fine of not less than 5,000 pesos nor more than 10,000 pesos. And for failure to act or reported acts of GVSH, committed sa kanyang educational institution, the penalty would be fine of not less than 10,000 pesos but not more than 15,000 pesos. So, bago po yan. Ano pa yung bago? The law provided additional requirements for educational and training institutions. Among these is that the schools are directed by the law to assign an officer or a person readily accessible to receive complaints on GVSH. Readily accessible meaning madali pong malapitan, available 24/7, at saka po knowledgeable on gender-based violence such as sexual harassment, mental health counseling, and other relevant knowledge and skills in handling the subject. So dapat meron po siyang skill na on how to process and facilitate po itong mga ganitong klase ng complaints. And then of course, nakalagay din po sa law natin that complaints must be processed in a manner that is most efficient and convenient to the complainant. So mga kapatid, sa pananampalataya po kay Kristo, yung batas kasi po ay talaga pong pinoprotektahan yung victim survivor of gender-based sexual harassment. That's why ang nakalagay dito dapat most convenient and most efficient sa kanya. So we have to always be mindful of that this law was created for the protection of the victim survivor of harassment. Okay? And then of course, nakalagay din po that the complaint has to be, the assigned officer must determine if the complainant needs immediate assistance. Like for example, if the complainant needs counseling. Like when I was still working with the SWD as a frontline service provider, we were trained on critical incident stress debriefing. Sometimes, kung kakatapos lang po ng incident, yung harrowing experience ng isang bata, you need to conduct critical incident stress debriefing para matulungan mo yung biktima po ma-process on what happened. And once na tama po yung processing po nung kanyang trauma or experience, it would be very easy for the child to, or the victim survivor to lay down yung courses of action na dapat niyang gawin. So dapat meron siyang, yung ating pong assigned officer or person who will receive complaints on GVSH is trained on basic counseling, on critical incident stress debriefing, okay? And then of course, nakalagay din po dito, the assigned officer must forward the case to the CODI within 48 hours from receipt. And this person must ensure confidentiality in the process of accepting complaints. So very important na dapat meron tayong isang area that is secure, yung hindi po naririnig ng lahat na siya ay nagko-complain about GVSH. Because the law said it has to be processed in strict confidentiality. So anong bago pa po dito sa batas natin, the law also requires the school to provide support for parties involved in GVSH-related court proceedings. For example, if the child decided to file a complaint, or the victim survivor decided to file a complaint, the school must give due considerations, to the parties, Like for example, pwede po na i-excuse siya for absences from classes if they need to attend court hearings, or kung may mga other school or work requirements na hindi niya agad ma-deliver because processing pa siya dun sa kanyang trauma, so dapat bigyan ng due consideration ito ng eskwelahan. Bago po yan. Ano pa yung bago sa batas? Of course, very clear na po yung requirement na pagkakaroon ng Code of Conduct for workplace and education training institutions. So dapat po meron tayong Code of Conduct for all training and for all educational and training institutions. And the Code of Conduct must include the following, no? It has to specify the procedures on how to file cases, how to do investigations, how to resolve, what are the appropriate remedies like appeal or motion for reconsideration for admin cases, no? And then also it has to include yung mga rules of procedures in case one of the members of the CODI has to be inhibited. So dapat meron pong part ng Code of Conduct mo yung the procedures if one of the party requests for inhibition of any of the members of the CODI. And then the Code of Conduct must also specify the functions, the responsibilities, the composition, and qualifications of the members of CODI. Okay? And bukod dyan, okay, other than that, no, the Code of Conduct must also highlight, no, the penalties to be imposed for members of CODI who will be not performing their job appropriately or inadequately ang performance ng kanilang functions. So dapat very clear din po yan sa Code of Conduct. And also the Code of Conduct must also include the different types of trainings that the CODI members must undergo, like gender sensitivity, gender-based violence, sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, and other gender development topics as needed. And ang kagandahan po at gustong-gusto ko po dito sa batas na to is yung last. The Code of Conduct must include, okay, a statement or a provision relative to the giving of support to the victims, survivors of gender-based sexual harassment. And all of this has to be clearly stipulated in the Code of Conduct. What are these services? Psychological or psychosocial counseling. If the school cannot provide that, pwede pong meron kayong referral system or referral process. So dapat to what particular agency of the government you should refer the person or the victim. And also, you must provide assistance to the victim survivor on how to file admin cases, civil or criminal cases. So this law also provides for the CODI, no? But of course, yung all law natin may CODI na yon. But there are a lot of new provisions when it comes to the Committee on Decorum Investigation. One of that is the composition of the CODI. Okay, so in the composition of the CODI, very clear po na nakasulat, okay, na dapat daw po, ito yung membership ng CODI natin sa educational institution. So there should be at least one rep from the school administration, the trainers, the instructors, the professors or coaches and students or trainers, students and parents, no, as the case may be. Tapos the head of the institution may include other groups sa CODI mo kung nakikita mo na necessary i-add mo sila. Okay? Like for example, if you want to include partner stakeholders, sama mo siya, no? And then dapat daw po merong equal representation of persons with diverse SOGI or sexual orientation, gender identity as far as practicable. And there should be a permanent alternate, no? In case of the absence of the regular member. So, ang requirement dito sa permanent alternate, dapat po may authority siya to render decision. Why do we have a permanent alternate? Because sometimes the regular member has to inhibit himself or herself, no? So therefore, dapat may permanent alternate. Kasi pag walang permanent alternate, ma-stall po yung investigation of the cases. And remember, makikita niyo po mamaya, the law said that you have to finish the investigation within 10 days from receipt of the complaint. Okay? So what's new? In terms of composition, the head of the CODI should be a woman. So it's there in the law. It's in the implementing rules and regulation. Also, not less than half of its members though should also be women. And they should be composed of members who are impartial, not connected or related to the alleged perpetrator within the fourth degree of consanguinity or affinity. So that's why we have a permanent alternate, because if one of the members of CODI is related po, no, to the alleged perpetrator within the fourth degree of consanguinity or affinity, automatic mag-i-inhibit siya. So the permanent alternate will pitch in, no? And dapat daw po wala siyang prior record of involvement as respondent, defendant, or accused in any case of whatever nature of sexual harassment. So for example, if before the law was enacted pa, or previous pa, before siya naging member ng CODI or naging personnel po ng Miriam College, he or she was accused of sexual harassment, automatically na po siya pwede maging member. So very important na magkaroon ng background checking for members of the CODI. The functions, of course, they have to investigate and decide on the complaint within 10 days or less upon receipt of the complaint. So this is very new, no? Kasi dati po, walang nakalagay na within 10 days. But now, to ensure talaga po that justice is served, no, appropriately at hindi po talaga speedily, no, hindi talaga na-stall yung pag-provide ng hustisya. Sabi nga, justice delayed is justice denied, no? We have to ensure that we are able to conclude the investigation within 10 days or less pa upon receipt of the complaint. Remember, the assigned officer, no, has to forward it within 48 hours to CODI, and CODI has 10 days to finish the investigation. And of course, the CODI has to observe due process. They have to protect the complainant from retaliation. In most of the cases that I've handled for GVSH, for sexual harassment, there is always retaliation. Okay? So, kawawa talaga po yung victim survivor. And then they have to guarantee gender-sensitive handling of complaints and confidentiality of the identity of the parties and the proceedings to the greatest extent possible. So dapat hindi po nalalaman, no, ng community sino po yung mga victims at sino po yung alleged perpetrator also. Okay. Now remember, kanina di ba sa Code of Conduct I highlighted na dapat yung Code of Conduct mo included doon yung penalties ng members ng CODI who will not be performing, no, yung kanilang job properly or inadequately ang performance sa kanilang functions. So kaya po, kapag ka po ang CODI, they fail to act on the report, then of course, they will be held liable or accountable based on the Code of Conduct na i-develop po ng ating pong school or na-develop po ng ating eskwelahan. And then, ito po yung bago din. Like what I've said kanina, the law provides for longer prescriptive period for the acts of gender-based sexual harassment, and it depends on the type of harassment that you committed. So technically, it also depends on the gravity of the offense that you committed. So for Class A, ng gender-based sexual harassment in public places, the prescriptive period is 1 year. For Class B, ng GVSH in public places, that is 3 years. For Class C, ng GVSH in public places, that's 10 years. So dati po 3 years lang, regardless kung ano yung kinumit mo. But now, it depends on the gravity of the offense. Now, if it's online, no, you committed GVSH online, of course, that is imprescriptible. Why? Because your what you posted online is always there. It will never leave yung ating pong web. Napupunta lang yan doon sa tinatawag na dark web. Okay? Yung sa dark web. Kasi what you see online is just the tip of the iceberg. Yung pong hindi nyo nakikita, yung mga pinagpo-post nyo lahat, nandiyan po sa ilalim nun. That's what I learned, no, from my training on cybercrime prevention. Sabi nila, you know what you see is just the tip of the iceberg. Yung mas malalim nandun sa ilalim. Mas malaki, okay? So mas malawak. So everything that you post online is there. Even if tanggalin po natin yan, it's there na. Okay, once you search, it will always be there. Kaya po ang GVOSH is ang prescriptive period niya is ang prescriptive period po niya ay imprescriptible. Now for offenses committed under Section 16, that is GVSH in workplace, and Section 21, that is GVSH in education training institution, the prescriptive period po is 5 years. Okay? By the way, GVOSH pala po is penalized, no, by prison correctional, the medium period of prison correctional, yung gender-based online sexual harassment. The penalty for GVOSH is prison correctional medium period, that's 4 years. Okay? Now, ano pang bago dito po sa batas natin? Of course, very, very clearly stated po yung pag-observe ng strict confidentiality. Okay? At all stages of the investigation. And then, if there's a case filed in court, you can request for a restraining order to direct the perpetrator to stay away from the offended person at a distance specified by the court, or to stay away from the residence, school, place of employment, or any specified place frequented by the offended person. Yung isang maganda po dito. This is one of the protective measures provided by RA 11313 to the victim survivor of GVSH. And then, ang isang maganda po, may remedies and psychological counseling. For example, no, if the victim survivor had to seek professional help, and then he or she paid, no, for that, for the professional or medical help that he or she sought, no. So yung pong fees doon, i-charge po doon sa perpetrator ng GVSH. And then ano pang bago, like what I have said kanina, hierarchical relationship is no longer an element. So therefore, GVSH can be committed between peers, to a superior officer by a subordinate, or to a teacher by a student, to a trainer by a trainee. So meaning, pwede pong student to student kasi peers nga eh, or pwede pong it's the student harassing the teacher, the trainer, no, the coach, or it could be the subordinate harassing the superior. So wala na po yung hierarchical relationship. Hindi na siya element, di ba? Like in 78-77. And then of course, what's new? The law strongly encourages reporting of acts of GVSH committed against another individual. So the law encourages yung pong pagkakaroon natin, no, ng support, no, sa ano po, no, sa atin pong mga kasamahan sa community. So piniprevent niya po yung concept ng bystander. So as much as possible, the law said na wag na tayong maging bystander because you will only be ending gender-based sexual harassment and all other forms of gender-based violence if we will be helping the victim by reporting, no, by reporting the incident that we witnessed, and by not being silent, no, for about what is happening in our society or in our community, particularly in our school. Kasi sabi nga po ni sabi po ni Ellie Wiesel, no, what hurts the victim most is not the cruelty of the oppressor, but the silence of the bystander. That's why the law strongly encourages the reporting of GVSH that you witness in your environment or in your society or in your institution or organization. So with that po, maraming salamat po. I'm giving back the floor to our MC for the open forum. If there are questions with respect to my lecture on RA 11313 or the Safe Spaces Act.
Thank you so much, Attorney Esquivel. I am sure that at this point, our dear parents may have some questions. So to facilitate the open forum, let me call on Ms. Andrea Ignacio.
Thank you, Attorney Miles, and thank you, Ms. Patriluz. Okay, so we would like now to open the floor for any questions that you might have, dear parents. Okay, so you can click the raise hand button or you can type your questions in the chat box.
I hope the parents are not asking questions because the discussion is very clear. Sabi po nung aking trainer dati, there are only two things daw to look into pag tahimik. It's either they learned they learned from your discussion, or they did not learn anything. Sana doon kayo sa doon sa first, yung you learn from the discussion. I hope my lecture is very clear for all the parents.
Any questions, dear parents? Or was everything clear na po?
So, mukhang tahimik ang parents natin, Miss Andrea.
Yes po.
Anyway, you can email naman us if you have questions at the CRAC. No? We will respond to your inquiries, or if you have some things to consult with, you can email us at CRAC, and we will ensure na we will be able to respond to it. Oh, there's a question. I think there's a question in the chat box, Miss Andrea.
Okay, so from Miss Marie Sheila Tanaliga from the high school, how do you guarantee the anonymity of the victim?
Okay, that's a very good question, no? There are instances that the victim doesn't want to file a case. So sometimes the ones who inform the authorities is the person who saw or witnessed the harassment. Of course, ako kasi I always believe that, in helping victim survivors, kinakailangan empower mo muna sila, di ba? So if the victim survivor is not yet ready to to file a complaint, no, or to formalize her or his complaint, but there is a report, then therefore it would be the responsibility of the Committee on Decorum Investigation to conduct, no, inquiries, no, on with respect to the complaint, without, of course, compromising the anonymity of the victim. Pero ang kailangan natin tingnan dito ay paano mo i-empower yung biktima to really file, no, or inform the authorities about the incident that took place or that was perpetrated against the harassment that was perpetrated against her. Dapat kasi po siya, as a social worker, I always believe in the principle of client self-determination. Yun eh. Turuan mo muna siyang ma-determine that there is an abuse perpetrated against her. You tell the person that there are a lot of remedies available, and then pag ready na siya, then saka natin saka lang siya mag-file ng complaint para yung anonymity niya. In the process, dapat hindi nakikilala o nakikita yung pangalan niya. And then also, I discourage po yung confrontation, yung wala pong file complaint, pinagko-confront na agad. So ako, I really discourage that. Like for example, if there's a complaint, you investigate, but you don't ask the student and the perpetrator, the alleged perpetrator, to be confronted para nang wala pang process. So very important po yung pag-observe natin ng confidentiality for the anonymity of the victim survivor po ng ating pong gender-based sexual harassment. I hope I was able to answer the question of Ms. Sheila. Tama po ba, Ms. Andrea?
Yes po. Okay.
And by the way pala, in the code of conduct, you can actually include a provision there that if anyone violates confidentiality clause, pwede siyang bigyan ng admin liability or penalty. It's up for the institution or the organization to provide these measures.
Here's another question from Ms. Marietta Aboga from the high school as well. Is there a CODI in place now at MC?
From what I know po, nakapag-meeting na rin kami before, yes, there is a CODI already in place. And Director Noel Racho will be explaining about it, yung policy po ng MC on safe spaces. So he will explain how it was translated, no, the law, how the law was translated into a very good MC policy.
Any other questions, dear parents?
Okay, so I guess
wala na po. Okay, so if there's none, I will turn back the floor. I'll give back the floor to Ms. Patriluz.
Thank you everyone for listening. Thank you, Ms. Andrea.
Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Esquivel, and thank you, Ms. Ignacio. Thank you also to the parents who asked questions. Again, if you have other questions or further questions, you may send an email to CRAC. Okay. At this point, before we proceed to the second part of the program, we shall now pause for a 5-minute health break.
Attorney, I think there's another question. May pahabol na question on the chat box.
Yes, Ms. Doc Louie, no?
Will the awareness of this law be made aware to our children?
Yes, ma'am. We at CRAC, we have a plan to also give lectures to our students on Republic Act 11313. It's part of our activities for next year. Right, Doc Louie?
Yes.
Part of our plan.
Yes.
Rest assured, ma'am, we will also raise the awareness and consciousness of our students on GBSH. You're welcome po.
Attorney Miles?
Yes, ma'am.
There's a follow-up question here.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
From Mayan Pasco. I have a question, attorney. If a case is under investigation, can both parties be allowed not to attend school or go within the school premises? I think most of the victims are afraid to go back to school, especially if the case ain't over yet.
Okay, that's a very good question, ma'am. No? Remember, in RA 11313, I presented a provision on the support services that or the support assistance that could be provided by the school. So this could your concern could be part of the policy to be crafted, or if ever to be included if there's already an existing policy on addressing gender-based sexual harassment in the training institution and educational institution. Of course, if the child experienced trauma, no, and there's a need for that particular child or that particular victim survivor to undergo psychosocial counseling or interventions, and the social worker or the psychologist said that it would not help if the child would see either the environment, no, where it happened, or the perpetrator himself, then of course they can always request, no, the parents could always request for this particular support from the school. So pwede po siyang palawakin, no? Pwedeng palawakin po yung policy ng eskwelahan to include this type of support services. Kasi what is important here is the best interest of the child. That should always be the paramount consideration when we create programs, policies, and interventions. It must always be what will work for the best interest of the child. If not going to school for the meantime while the child is undergoing psychosocial counseling or interventions, it would work for his or her best interest. Then so be it. That could be worked on, or that could be worked out with the school. Thank you.
Hey, attorney, follow-up po, sorry. I have a follow-up question.
Yes,
Sorry.
ma'am.
Kasi diba, if they're not gonna attend school, baka naman yung parang ma-pinpoint agad ng others, ng classmates, that there's a problem with her or something, and ma-highlight yung case. So yung isa yung parang dilemma na if my child would undergo this kind of harassment and she can't go to school, but then if she doesn't go to school, malalaman ng ibang classmates agad that there's something wrong. Because I had a problem with my other child. Or this is a case of bullying from another school. Hinarap sila face to face, and every day yung child ko doesn't want to go to school kasi nandun pa rin yung nang bully sa kanya.
Yes,
Oo. So parang isang worry naman ng child ko pag he doesn't go to school, mabubuli naman siya ng iba saying na he was bullied. Parang ganun. So yun yung isang parang ang hirap pag if it happens.
That's why, ma'am, it's case-to-case basis. You have to consider ano yung mag-work for the best interest. For example, if there's a need to preventively suspend pending investigation yung alleged perpetrator, then the school can actually do that. If the child will not suffer trauma, if he or she will be going to the same environment. Kasi may mga bata po na kapag na pumasok sa same environment where kung saan po nangyaring incident, there's trauma. Yung nare-relieve po yung trauma. So kaya minsan po, some of the psychologists, some of the social workers would say, a change of environment muna. So don't let the child muna go to school. But if the child will not relieve the trauma, pag bumalik siya sa same setting, sa same environment, that's okay. Then what you can do now is para ma-prevent po yung confrontation niya with the alleged perpetrator, then the school can have a policy on preventive suspending pending investigation of a certain alleged perpetrator for a crime committed or for an infraction committed within the environment or within the institution. That could work po so remember, di ba, if there's a case the law states that if there's a pending case nga po in court, you can actually request for a restraining order. Diba?
Yeah.
And if the court said na, no, you cannot go to the school because the child will suffer from trauma once he or she see you, no? So therefore, pwede po siyang i-direct ng court not to go to school. So parang it's like preventively suspending also.
Yeah.
So yeah, we always have to consider, like ako po as a child rights lawyer, no, as a child rights practitioner, I always consider what will work for the best interest of the child. That should always be the paramount consideration. And in all public and private institutions or organizations, that should be the basis in deciding cases, in making policies, or in creating interventions.
Yeah. Siguro talaga yung support system is really best afterwards, because back in high school, I'm from Miriam also, we had cases before na parang it was not properly handled, so parang yung mga perpetrator na parang na-harass palalo si victim. So yan, mas maganda nga na may ganito na form.
Yes.
And ayan, thank you for enlightening.
Yes, you're welcome, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Pasco, for that follow-up question. And also thank you, Attorney Esquivel, for answering the questions from the parents. We shall now continue our program. At this point, let me call on Dr. Noel Racho, who will give us an orientation on MC's policy on Safe Spaces Act.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, dear parents. As mentioned by Attorney Miles, the Miriam College has already implementing rules and regulations relative to the Safe Spaces Act of 2019. And that is to ensure that the institution is compliant with the provisions of the law. But I would say that we have even gone beyond the requirement of the law. What I will present to you now would be the Safe Spaces primer, and this is already up in our website, which you can check. More details will be found in the website. So for now, I'll just mention provisions that are already aligned with the provisions that were discussed already by Attorney Miles. The policy framework of Miriam College relative to the implementation of the Safe Spaces Act is within the definition of what safe space is, as called out from and consolidated from the different town hall meetings we conducted with our stakeholders, students, employees, parents, and alumni. And so by definition, Miriam College would like to ensure that Miriam College will be a place where verbal, emotional, psychological, and physical harm is absent, and where there are people who could respond properly and immediately to a person or a group's call for help. And you would see this later when I discuss specific provisions in terms of the reporting mechanisms and support services that would be made available to victims. In another context, Miriam College as a safe space would ensure that its environment would respect people, they would give them a sense of security, and that they could be genuinely themselves, where there is genuine care, support system, sensitivity, equality, in short, no discrimination based on gender, age, race, social standing, and experiences. I'd say it's both aspirational and to a certain degree, some of the elements are already present. We just need to strengthen these elements as we ensure zero instances of sexual harassment. And therefore, given that context, Miriam College articulates three responsibilities here. Number one, as its basic foundation, we will value the dignity of persons, respect human rights, and that because we are important players in nation building, we would uphold fundamental equality of men and women. Number two, it is incumbent upon Miriam College as an educational institution to ensure that we create, maintain safe spaces for all members of our community, but especially to our students. And because we are committed to truth, we would ensure prompt investigation on all allegations of harassment. The contemplation of the Safe Spaces Act was taken into account when we looked into the different procedures and steps to be taken by the institution when there are incidents of sexual harassment. As mentioned already by Attorney Miles, we also um, the adopted the offenses that are outlined in the Safe Spaces Act. But in particular, we would like to highlight that sexual harassment may come in the following forms: verbal, that would be examples would be catcalling, sexual jokes, homophobic remarks, etc. Non-verbal, graphic, physical aggression, intimidation, and hostile conduct. Recognizing the different forms, we also note and highlight that, as mentioned by Attorney Miles, the victim would really be the main concern of the law. By definition, therefore, once a victim feels, okay, that certain behavior or actions that are sexual in nature would result to mental, emotional, or psychological distress, when there is fear of personal safety, such as sexual harassment committed through non-consensual, unwanted, or uninvited sexual action, or fear of personal safety for remarks against any person, then this would be enough basis to file a complaint against a perpetrator. Um, Miriam College, recognizing that because of the unique situation and unique relationships within the institution, number one, we are still integrating the Sexual Harassment Act of 1995, where the main criterion is moral ascendancy, particularly when you look at student and teacher relationship, where there is power relations. We look at, in the new code of conduct, we look at moral ascendancy as an aggravating factor to a sexual harassment complaint. And therefore, also, we have expanded the definition of sexual harassment consistent with the Safe Spaces Act of 2019, that offenders can be any member of the community, even in the absence of moral ascendancy or hierarchical relationship. And so we have outlined, specified in our policy, the instances where or who can commit sexual harassment. Letter A, against a student, trainee, by a faculty, trainer, coach, or employee. Against a faculty, trainer, or coach by a student, trainee, or employee. I think this is what was new, this is what is new in the Safe Spaces Act, as emphasized by Attorney Miles, that there is no longer hierarchical relationship as the main determinant of the commission of sexual harassment. Third is against a subordinate by a supervisor. Before, when a supervisor, or when a peer, for instance, would commit harassment, that would not fall under sexual harassment but would fall under acts of lasciviousness. And so that's item 5, against peers by classmates, friends, or co-employees. And then against third-party service providers and suppliers and other stakeholders by student, faculty, and co-workers. And of course, against students, employees by third-party service providers, suppliers, and other stakeholders. When we talk of third-party service providers, we refer to, for instance, our security guards, janitors, maintenance, because they are third-party service providers. Now, in the context of Miriam College, as defined already, the possible places or areas where sexual harassment can be committed, in particular, we have identified anywhere within the premises covering QC, MC Nuvali, and MC Alvera. Second, this would also cover organizations, companies on the job sites, which we have partnered with faculty members and employees, internship, apprenticeship, seminars, workshops, etc. And this would also, I'd like to emphasize also that when you speak of, and kind of mentioned already by Attorney Miles, now even school buses, canteen concessionaires, and are still a part of and can be liable for sexual harassment. Now, we just outlined some examples where gender-based sexual harassment may occur within Miriam College's jurisdiction. So that's 1 to 12. Let me also tell you that, as already mentioned, even if the act or sexual harassment incident happens outside the premises of Miriam College, by a faculty, by an employee, by a janitor, those people would still be liable simply because of their relationship with Miriam College. So even if it's committed outside the premises of Miriam College, it would still be, it's still possible to file a case against the perpetrators. So in terms of reporting an incident, who can complain? Okay, employees, students, or those undergoing training, instruction, education, third-party service providers, suppliers, applicants for employment, and other relevant stakeholders of Miriam College. That includes parents, no? So in other words, it has really expanded, no? The Safe Spaces Act, and as adopted by Miriam College, expanded the those who can complain. In Miriam College, and this is what I was saying, we have gone beyond the requirement of the Safe Spaces Act. We have institutionalized three mechanisms of reporting mechanisms. Number one would be the regular channels or designated offices and identified by the school. Second, we now have MC Safe Spaces email. And third, we have SafeLine, a anonymous and confidential telephone service. I remember a question that has to do with confidentiality. The MC Safe Spaces email and SafeLine, by default, would be a mechanism that would ensure complete confidentiality of complainants. So the email and the SafeLine were really made for that particular purpose. As the contemplation of the Safe Spaces Act allows for anonymous complaint, no? Aside from identified complaint. So what are examples of the regular channels or designated offices? Number one, students may report to the Student Council and Office of Student Affairs. So we have expanded the role of Student Council. No? If students feel more comfortable simply reporting to the Student Council, they can do that. But they can also do that with the Office of Student Affairs. Second, we have identified the Office of the Principal for parents, okay, and Office of the Dean for the Higher Education Unit. Of course, employees may report to the Human Resources Division. Our third-party service providers and suppliers may report to the Administrative Service Office, and our alumni may report to the Alumni Engagement Office. Note that while these are designated offices, these mechanisms will not preclude the possibility of victims to report to anyone within the institution where they feel more comfortable. But just for some structure, we have identified these offices. Again, if students, particularly students, are not comfortable, then they can do it through, let me go to this part. They can go to the Safe Spaces email. It's safespaces@mc.edu.ph. So let me just kind of highlight this mechanism. Um, so senders have the option to report an incident or file a complaint anonymously or otherwise. Okay? But in the cases that were handled by the TJC, there were more anonymous cases that were brought to our attention than those identified. Okay, some of them prospered because there were some information that were made available. Either way, complainants are assured that every report will be treated with utmost confidentiality. In fact, we do not know who are, receiving the emails, but there's a dedicated office uh, who that an office and people who are authorized to open the uh, the email. It's not. I think we only have one or two authorized personnel to open these the complaints here. Now, a counselor will be at the receiving end and will email back questions related to the incident that will guide the school in its investigation. So I think this was mentioned by Attorney Miles, the importance of an initial assessment should be made, especially to students. Okay, so once we receive the complaint, they are immediately looked into by a counselor and see if there are initial interventions that could be given to the victims. Then the coordinator will be responsible for directing the complaint to the proper committee, services for case management, which may be any of the following. Just to let you know that the safe spaces, while its focus is sexual harassment, could also accept other complaints like bullying, violations of privacy with the use of social media platforms. Okay, but for sexual harassment cases by law, they will be forwarded to the Institutional Committee on Decorum and Investigation. That's the CODI. It can also be forwarded to the Employee Discipline Committee, unit level discipline committees, institutional counseling services, and unit level guidance and counseling services. Again, just to emphasize that we have also expanded, while we have expanded reporting mechanisms, we also have expanded committees that might receive and investigate complaints that might affect the safe spaces principle of the institution. The third, which is the newest and it has been launched, is really the MC Safe Line. So you see here that we have several numbers, no, one for Globe and Smart, and the operations are from Mondays to Fridays, 3 p.m. to 10 p.m. The reason for the 3 p.m. and the 10 p.m. is that we already have people who might be able to handle complaints beginning 8 o'clock until 3 p.m. in the afternoon. But we want to make sure that we still have people who would be able to receive complaints from 3 to 10. Okay. So MC SafeLine is an anonymous and confidential telephone service, again, for MC students, faculty, and staff, and other stakeholders for that matter, if they have concerns related to safe spaces. The SafeLine also offers advice and support and refer callers to appropriate resources or services for further information and support. We have identified several support provisions to be made available, no, to victims by Miriam College. And so those who are responsible for the Safe Line would know already to whom, to what office, or what services to offer. A counselor will receive the call, direct the complaint to the proper committee, services for case management. Again, the same when you look at the procedure. when complaints are received through the Safe Spaces email. Should the caller need counseling support, the coordinator will refer him/her to an internal guidance and counseling services or to an external source. Insofar as external source is concerned, we also have partnered with certain institution to provide other resources that might not be available in Miriam College. SafeLine service will also provide information on the ways that the school handles issues related to other safe space concerns and violations, such as bullying and social media abuse, which I have mentioned. So in other words, we encourage people, particularly students, to use MC SafeLine because a lot of information will be provided to the victim so that the victim can be properly guided on the next steps. Now, with regard to filing a complaint, the following will be asked from the complainant. This is just to ensure that we have sufficient information to move forward in the investigation. So these are some details that will be asked from the complainant. Okay. So full name, position, address, parents, etc. Down the line, we will be asking, I think I'd like to highlight the last two bullet points, a brief statement of the relevant and material facts and evidence, and additional evidence and witnesses. Whether in fact this is anonymous or identified, the identity of the complainant who wish to be anonymous will be kept anonymous. Okay, except that the committee chair or some members might have to know some basic information, but the information will not be divulged outside the committee. As you'd see later, all members, parties involved in the investigation, will be asked to sign from the beginning non-disclosure of information. Now, once there is a complaint and there is a probable cause to proceed, in keeping with the requirement of due process, the respondent will be given a notice to explain and will be given 3 working days to submit his or her written, duly signed answer. And as we always say in legal parlance, if the respondent does not file a response within the given period, then his right or her right to be heard is waived. Now, in cases where the respondent is a minor, I think this is more applicable to our students at the BEU, the notice to explain will be given in the presence of a parent, guardian, or a counselor. Now, as mentioned also in compliance with the Safe Spaces Act, all reports and complaints will be forwarded to the CODI within 48 hours from receipt, and the committee shall follow the following steps: evaluate the report and complaint and determine whether probable cause exists. And within 5 days from receipt of the complaint referral, a hearing for the complainant will be scheduled. In cases involving a student, a counselor may sit in or accompany him or her during the hearings if there is a need to do so. I'd like also to mention that the presence of a lawyer may also be allowed, but they will have limited role as observers in the proceedings. Let me just caution everyone that while we have timelines to follow, in some cases there might be extension because of the complexity, and also, as mentioned by Attorney Miles, I think there will be more leeways given to complainants. And so we will not force the issue in terms of timeline, but of course, no, in terms of due process, we will also have to ensure that the respondent will also be given fair chance in the investigation. Now, in terms of the investigation, there will be separate interviews and hearings to allow committee to clarify and ask questions from both complainant and respondent. In this case, let me just assure parents that there's no confrontation that will happen between the complainant and the respondent, especially for the minor. especially for students at the BEU. So all interviews will be done separately, and at no point where there will be a confrontation between the complainant and the respondent. Again, to the extent possible, we will be including provision of support for victims of gender-based sexual harassment, such as psychological or psychosocial counseling services, referral services, and assistance in the filing of administrative, civil, and or criminal cases. I think it would not be if I will already tell you that Attorney Miles would be able to help us in this regard when the school would have to extend legal assistance in terms of making referrals. Right, attorney? Okay.
Yes, Doc.
Okay. So in terms of, I think this was asked, no? In terms of confidentiality and privacy, okay, what is our mechanism here? Consistent with the mandate of Section 22 of under the Safe Spaces Act, okay, participants in any of the proceedings shall be made to sign a non-disclosure agreement. In the event that there is a violation of the non-disclosure agreement, an administrative investigation will be conducted by the school and appropriate penalties will be meted out. So while we see that the signing of the non-disclosure agreement is a deterrence, we cannot also disregard the possibility that there might be um, uh, some instances where information, either information during the investigation, that might be leaked by either of the parties involved in the case. Now, once a respondent is informed about a complaint, how will the school protect the complainant from possible retaliation? Okay. We would like to say that given the responsibility of Miriam College, we will be providing the following services. So, number one, we shall provide all possible support services to employees, faculty members, and other stakeholders, such as but not limited to counseling and or medical services and coordination with law enforcement should the complainant choose to avail of such. In the event that the complainant decides to go to court, it shall be incumbent upon Miriam College to make the proper referral for legal assistance. And number three, the school shall cooperate in court proceedings as may be required through the appearances and or provision of documents and records. Just to let you know that we had one case before where the school was invited during the hearings of a criminal case of sexual harassment filed by student, but this was years ago. And our own records of the investigation by the CODI were also subpoenaed by the court. Okay, so we had an experience of this, and I think we will continue to do this if the need arises. And as already mentioned, number four, the school shall give due consideration to parties who might be involved in court proceedings with respect to work requirements and, of course, absences from classes when they need to attend court hearings. Now, I think this will also answer a question that was raised earlier. How will the school protect the complainant from possible retaliation? So we have outlined the following. One, employees will be asked to go on leave. We have done that in the recent handling of the sexual harassment cases. Number two, preventive suspension may be imposed if there is a continuing threat to the victim, such as the presence of the teacher, employee would instill fear, intimidation on the part of the student, and the student refused to go to school, then a preventive suspension might be in order. The maximum period is 30 days. But in some cases that might be extended, but it's a tricky situation. Number three is that students will be offered alternative learning platforms and or transfer of section, as the case may be. And then number four, for employees of third-party service providers, they will be asked to disengage from MC. That's immediate. Okay. The question is, who will hear and decide on the case? This is under decision, appeal, and sanctions. As required by law, it's going to be the Committee on Decorum and Investigation, or CODI, that will handle cases of gender-based sexual harassment as well as online sexual harassment. And we have an existing institutional CODI. It's headed by a parent, okay? And we have members who are alumni, students, administration, and faculty. And we also have alternates to these regular members of the CODI. In coordination with WAGI, the members will continue to receive training on gender sensitivity, gender-based violence, sexual orientation, SOGI as required by law. And as mentioned by Attorney Miles, as part of the requirement of the Safe Spaces Act, a respondent or a complainant may request that a particular member of the CODI be be inhibited from participating because of perceived partiality. Then the CODI committee will hear the appeal and make appropriate action. And when the committee members feel that there is valid ground for inhibiting some members, then the alternate members will take the place of those who will be requested to inhibit themselves from the proceedings. How long will it take for the committee to make the decision? Miriam College will be releasing the decision 10 days after the investigation and deliberation has been conducted. That is also because the final decision rests on the president. Okay, so the recommendation of the CODI will be forwarded to the president for her final approval of the recommendations of the CODI. Now, because the school commits to zero tolerance of any and all forms of sexual harassment, we are imposing the following disciplinary sanctions, but these are also contemplated in the Safe Spaces Act of 2019. If the offender are students, they are stripped of their diploma or will be issued an expulsion order consistent with the guidelines set out by CHED, TESDA, and DepEd. Now, in the case of students from BEU, if they have been found to have committed acts of gender-based sexual harassment, they will only be liable administratively, and that the matter will also be brought to the attention of the DSWD. For employees, we give the maximum penalty of termination, and this will, a part of the penalty would be the disclosure of the decision to future employers and non-issuance of recommendation. Let me also inform the parents that at the regional level, the National Capital Region of the Catholic Catholic Educational Associations of the Philippines, where Miriam College is a member school, and many other Catholic schools who are members of that organization, has started discussing to make that regional office a central clearinghouse for schools to ask if an applicant from another school has been terminated or been tried for sexual harassment. The only issue now that is being resolved would be the issue on privacy. Number three, for third-party service provider and suppliers, termination of engagement and will be blacklisted in Miriam College. while the commission of sexual harassment might only be by a janitor, by one employee, the penalty will be imposed upon the service provider itself. Okay, so this is to ensure that the service provider will will really uh, will really make their employees become aware of the school policy and constantly remind them the need to behave according to our code of conduct. And for other stakeholders, they will be blacklisted in Miriam College. Now, can the decision still be appealed? Okay. As I mentioned already, the president makes the final decision, and 7 days from the receipt of the document, the final decision will be communicated to the respondent and complainant. Now, is there an appeal process? Yes. Any party who feels that they have been aggrieved by the decision, either by the complainant or respondent, may file an appeal 5 days, within 5 days upon receipt of the decision of the president. And the appeal will be heard by the Institutional Appeals Committee. And insofar as the timeline is concerned, if no appeal is received within 5 days upon receipt of the decision, then the decision and penalty is considered final and executory. Now, in terms of the decision on the appeal, it will be communicated to the complainant and respondent through the following. For employees and third-party service providers, it would be through HR. For students and parents, through the unit heads. And for alumni, through the Alumni Engagement Office. I think that covers basically the important provisions in our safe spaces policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Racho. At this point, if our parents have any questions, then you can raise your questions now in the open forum that will be facilitated again by Ms. Ignacio.
Okay. So good afternoon again, dear parents. If you have any questions, please click the raise hand button, or you can type your questions in the chat box. Or if you'd like to remain anonymous, you could also send me a private message with your question. No questions, dear parents?
Andrea, perhaps
Yes,
we can
boss.
reverse, no, just to make sure that everything was understood. If the parents could just give a thumbs up if everything is clear.
Yes.
Too.
Okay, so parents, can you please give us a thumbs up if everything was clear? Okay. So thank you, dear parents, for giving us the thumbs up, and thank you again, once again, Dr. Racho. Okay, I'll return the floor back to Miss Patriluz. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Racho, and thank you, Ms. Ignacio. I think everything's clear that our parents don't have any questions. At this point, we would like to invite you to evaluate our orientation for today. So please find the link to the evaluation form in the chat box. It's been sent by Ms. Amorin. Kindly click the link and answer the evaluation form. We would really appreciate your feedback. Kindly save the link to the evaluation form and you may answer the form later, parents, after the program. So we hope that this has been a fruitful session for you, for everybody, okay, for both our parents and other members of the MC community. At this point, we would like to call on Dr. Louis Parungao to give us the closing prayer, to lead us in the closing prayer.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, together, let's reflect on this prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Dear loving Father, we come before you at this hour with thanksgiving in our hearts. As we leave here back to our places, we ask you to go with us as you have promised in your word. May we see your beauty, feel your love, know your wisdom, and experience your power. May we find the comfort we desire in you and the strength we need in your name. May your presence be with us every hour of the day. May your love be the passion in our hearts. May your joy be our strength when times are hard. May your presence be the peace that overflows in our lives. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Miriam of Nazareth, teach us your ways and lead us to Jesus. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Good afternoon, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Parungao, for that beautiful prayer. Once again, thank you, everybody, for joining us here today. Enjoy the rest of the day.